if one considers the symbiotic connection between rail transport and economic growth, you also wonder how Nigeria has managed all these years without a well-developed, functioning railway network. Now, railway remains a chief evacuation vehicle for major economies of the world, but Nigeria's priority probably had a faulty start, because from the outset, the experience has been neither visible nor, as we always say, glamorous. Now, someone described it as that of rusted iron and stubborn brick. Now, railway development was at the outset not really people-friendly. In other words, those who designed the facilities did not intend it to benefit Nigerians. So, at independence, Nigeria inherited a rail network system that specifically served the purpose of colonial masters. Now, that's what experts have said. But after what appeared to be an early promise, the whole community of the rail shrunk in size, vitality, efficiency, and of course, relevance. You know what I'm talking about. The first visible attempt to revive the sleeping giant was made during the regime of former President Olusegun Obasanjo. But suffice it to say that the Buhari administration seemed to have injected a second wind, which has transformed an erstwhile topsy-turvy ride into a smoother stretch. Now, from the Abuja-Kaduna standard gauge rail line to Itakpe, Warri, Lagos, Ibadan, the Port Harcourt, Enugu, Maiduguri, and the proposed coastal corridor, the 115-year-old railway system is now climbing into renewed relevance, but of course not without challenges. So this week on Late Edition, we ask, does the Abuja-Kaduna standard gauge railway provide good grounds to trudge onto the next level in rail projects delivery in Nigeria? I am Claire Delabu Abdurrazak. I'll be right back. Is what I call the total indigenous package for the rail development in Nigeria. He has significant and extensive experience in the whole chain of rail development. Engineer Freeborn Fided Ohiria is an electrical engineer with expertise in electrical, mechanical, signaling, telecommunication, rail transport design and development, and of course, supervision. Engineer Ohiria joined the NRC as a pupil or trainee engineer, and that was as far back as 1987. And of course, he rose to his present position. I'll tell you that later. He is a fellow of many bodies, including Nigerian Institute of Mechanical Engineering, COREN, and NSE. Engineer Kira is the managing director of the Nigerian Railway Corporation, steering the railway modernization project under, of course, the steady hands of President Muhammadu Buhari and, of course, Minister of Transportation. Now, Kayode Kalitsin is a principal partner of Infrastructure Delivery International firm. He led the UK Nigeria Infrastructure and Advisory Facility transport support to federal and state governments funded by the UK. He was also instrumental in developing the country's rail concession strategy at the Bureau of Public Enterprises. He was the first manager of the first attempt to concession the railways. He was also team leader in drafting the transport bills, including the railway and national transport bills. Kayode has also been involved in the privatization of the Rail Track PLC, and that's in the UK. So it's my pleasure to welcome both gentlemen to Late Edition this week. I thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Let me begin with the MD. You've just marked 100 days of smooth ride on the Abuja-Kaduna railway axis. What does that mean to us as Nigerians?
As Nigerians, it means that if we come together as one, we can make things work perfectly for everybody. We marked 1,000 days of train operation on the Abuja-Kaduna rail network today without having serious accidents. We have had incidents, but those things are like the cow incident we reported about, and maybe somebody lying down on the track and slept off. Apart from that, it means Nigerians can do it when they want to do it, and they can do it if we put ourselves together as one, as work as one Nigeria. Because those of us that are working there are from various parts of this country, and we understand the real language, and we are doing it as Nigerians, and we are putting our best efforts to deliver.
What does it mean to have 1,000 days of accident-free train ride? Did you envisage when constructing that we would have accidents?
No. You see, when you walk, you must fall. When you run, you must fall. But when you run and you don't fall, you should congratulate yourself for that.
Okay. Engineer, Mr. Kaide, what does for you, should we celebrate 1,000 days of smooth ride?
Well, yes. I think that any attempt to actually expand the railway network in Nigeria should be commended. And but however, you know, when I look back as to where we started as far back as 2002, when we developed the rail concession strategy, we had a completely different vision. And whilst I feel the government is, as I can say in a very polite way, stumbling through, you know, there is a lack of a clear plan and there's a lack of a real strategy.
Before you go to that, I just want to know, within the context of the celebration, I mean, train accidents are, you know, not always, you know, they don't just happen. So this celebration, is it, do you support it? Should it be celebrated that we've had this run and accident-free?
100%.
Does it call for celebration?
Of course it does.
Okay.
It's a new line, so therefore the chances of things like derailment happening are extremely minimal. It's a new track, it's a modern track, it's a modern train, if I'm correct. So I think that, you know, the only risk that line possibly envisaged, as the MD mentioned, was obviously people crossing the track at the at the wrong time because the track is not fenced, or, you know, certain animals actually, you know, grazing on the track. But as far as train operations are going, 1,000 days, of course, must be celebrated, especially.
So we must also commend the people for, you know, cooperating, given the character of Nigerians.
Well, yes, but I think, you know, there's an incident of a poor man who actually fell asleep on the track, and that's obviously out of ignorance. But I think that, you know, for most human beings, when you see a track that isn't being used, you know, you tend to not really envisage anything moving on the track. But once the people in the vicinity start to understand that a high-speeding vehicle passes there from time to time, I think there's a survival instinct that just prevents you from actually crossing that track carelessly. It's almost like, you know, saying you want to cross a highway.
Are there certain things we could have done? You know, of course, not relying on people's support, because people would always do the wrong things. That's why we are mortals. That's why we are human beings. You know, are there supposed to be certain things that ought to have been done, you know, to prevent any occurrence of any derailment or accident?
Okay. I don't know if I could categorize myself as a stereo expert. From experience, I think everything that needed to be done is coming in through the signaling. Before now, we used to have mechanical signaling, but we are moving from there going to electronic signaling. That at least we are trying to see if the driver can see at least some distance on the track. The driver can talk to the next driver. The trains are controlled by what we call the control units, and I can view it on my phone. That is the target. That's where we are going to, and that's what we are working towards.
Okay.
So as we continue to improve and decrease the number of train runs, the signaling solution, we are also trying to improve on them, so that you don't need me to talk to the driver to say that is something that will make the train have accidents, like maybe sand on the track, bad track, maybe there was a rainfall and the track washed out. So you should be able to see some distance before the train get there. And the train, what we call electric fencing, so that when you give this, the right of way for a particular train, maybe the driver forgot he want to cross over, the locomotive should cut off power, and it will stop there, and it would, there will be a penalty for that driver. So that's where we are going to, and the what do you call it now? The journey of many might start with one step. So we talk about concession on the narrow gauge. Nothing is wrong with that, but nothing is wrong about catching up with time. As we are talking about standard gauge, people are already talking about the Hyperloop.
Let's take this conversation.
So that
let's
we
take this
should
conversation.
not wait for yesterday.
Yes.
We should do tomorrow.
Let's take this conversation, step by step. I just want you to give us an idea, of what has been the outcome of our BRT initiative. I mean, the Belt and Road initiative so far, in terms of the rolling stock.
You see, the rolling stock we have, and that's why we talk about the difference between the narrow gauge and standard gauge. You see, for you to go for the narrow gauge, I'm not saying we should continue to do it till we get all the standard gauge in place. Otherwise, those of us that still have the knowledge, if there is no narrow gauge, we will not even have the knowledge to build on. So, and those that we cannot serve immediately with the standard gauge, we should continue to serve them with the narrow gauge. So, when you do the standard gauge, you can easily get the rolling stock, because the people at present building them are mostly on standard gauge. Like, for instance, when we order the narrow gauge, you have to wait for some time, and it costs you a premium to order. Most times it's more expensive than the standard gauge that the developing world is using. So those are things Nigeria should take away from there. We should not attempt to stop the way we are moving now by trying to do the standard gauge. I used to advise my minister, so I hope we'll be able to catch up with them, because we have gone to the US and see people trying to do Hyperloop, where we are talking about a 1,000 kilometer, a train in a vacuum. So maybe by the time we finish standard gauge, people will not be talking about standard gauge, they'll be talking about train Hyperloop. Okay. So, and we'll have problem again getting the parts for the standard gauge. So we should do it so that people can get the benefit. Now
you've taken me to my next question, which has to do with deployment. I know, Mr. Caddleson, your idea of how rail network should be deployed is quite different. Can you give us an idea? We know that they say rail drives economy, world economies, but it hasn't done that for us. Have we wrongly or rightly deployed it?
Well, I think my first concern, when I heard about the development of the standard gauge project as far back as 2009, was one of disbelief and a bit of shock, because we were halfway through a rail concession program. We had just concessioned the ports at the BPE, one of the most successful port concessions in Africa. That attracted a lot of attention. People sat up and realized Nigeria was serious. We received most bids for an African rail concession than any other African country, and people were taking Nigeria seriously. And the idea was to utilize the existing narrow gauge line, mainly on freight, because it's important for us to understand that if we're talking about economic impact, if we're talking about development of a nation, the movement of freight is absolutely critical. So what we're seeing in Lagos today, in my view, is absolutely disgraceful. We're seeing trucks parked on bridges, we're seeing congestion in Apapa, we're seeing a whole area of Apapa that is just completely uninhabitable. And at the same time, we're strangely building a track next to an existing track. So to me, in a country that needs rail, the duplication of rail on an existing corridor, I find that to be one of the strangest decisions. What we should think about is how to expand railways to cities that have never seen rail. And we have talked about the prioritization of rail expansion. And if you go to a place called Agbo, you will find out that Agbo, there was a railway village built for 250 houses. And the plan, in accordance with the 25-year vision, was to expand the east-west line from Agbo, heading from Benin all the way to Abeokuta. So you're passing through Edo and other states that have never seen rail. And you're moving from Agbo all the way to Enugu. So you have that east-west rail going along that axis. So the duplication of the standard gauge next to the parallel narrow gauge, I find that an extremely strange decision.
Okay, thank you. Let me put you on hold so that the MD can also respond. He raised two issues: the issue of utilization, rail utilization for as passenger, freight rather than for cargo use, and he also talked about, building standard gauge rail alongside existing narrow gauge.
Okay. You see, the two things we should. You see, when you talk about the country or the citizen being patriotic, is how it affects the people, not how the economy of the nation is growing. If the economy of the nation is growing and it doesn't impact on the people, it's a different thing. So we have a standard gauge and we have a narrow gauge. We have a different route for the standard gauge, not exactly the same route. So where are these goods coming from? From the port. So you must have to move the product from the port to the hinterland. So how do you do that? By having an effective rail system. Kayode will agree with me that for you to get a concessionaire, I hope you still remember that the Takbe was concessions. Both of us were part of that concession, and they never let us anywhere. Why? We had a little problem on the track, and the concession abandoned it. So when you want to develop the infrastructure, put the money you are trying to make behind it. Now put forward what will benefit the people to have this infrastructure in place. The money will eventually come. So that otherwise, I compare government to God. You have this air free. It's not being charged. So we should be able to provide water. It's organizing it because God has already provided means of movement, provide everything. It's organizing it. That is the duty of government. And government has said, okay, let us have a better way of evacuating from the ports. And at least, thank God they listen to us and say, keep the narrow gauge working while we are doing the standard gauge. Otherwise, maybe the situation has been worse.
What's the economic benefit of the standard gauge to us, to Nigerians?
Okay. You see, when the narrow gauge was built 100 years ago, there was no technology to make the track, the gradient, and the curves. You have a lot of reverse curves that slow down the speed. You have gradients that make sometimes slow down the train. But now we are trying to build a train, and let's hope that if you leave Kano, at least can get to Port Harcourt with the load. Those days, the time has changed. Time is, they say time is money. So you have to develop a track and a rail system that can deliver the goods as when required.
On time.
Oh, yeah. So if we have been there since 87.
So does standard gauge rail have time advantage?
Because you get speeds. The poundage is different. The number of trains, the weight on the train is different. The other load is different. Okay. You can carry higher load, and you can carry a longer train because the track is being made to go as straight as possible. In Abeokuta, there is other pass, something like a mini underground. If in those days you cannot do that, otherwise you go through curves from Lagos to Moniya is 156 kilometers. But from the rail, the narrow gauge, from Lagos to Dugbe in Ibadan You know, Moniya is ahead with over 24 kilometers. It's 200 and something kilometers, which means you have reduced and you are now extending the rail service to different villages and different towns.
He talked about, Mr. Cattleson talked about.
Although you still say Lagos, it's on Lagos, but it's not on the same.
He's talking about the choice of the corridors now to develop. I see that we are still developing the corridors we inherited from the colonial masters. Of course, we know why those corridors.
Let me answer that. You see, when we had money, we would have done it, but we didn't do it. Now we now have to what we call counterpart funding. You have to borrow money, and those people, before they borrow you money, they have to look: will you be able to generate the money to even pay back? Or if you ask me to give you money, and you say you are borrowing, if I'm what we call dash, I can say to you, if you want to borrow, let me give you, may not even give me back. Another, if you have to pay back, I will look, do you have the capability to pay back? And what you want to use it for? So you want to build rail. Where can you move really goods? Where are the goods coming from? Is it Lagos or from Agbo?
Exactly. So where are the goods from your survey? Where are the goods coming from? And where are they going to? Most
people import through Apapa Port, and we have to tackle that. But the other way is that you say there's a good means of moving it. Do you understand? If there is a good means of moving it from the other ports, people will patronize them. But what do you want to gamble it, or you want to try to be sure? Let's say get 75% of what is on ground. I think that's what is happening. If you do Lagos Kano, we already have Itakpe-Warri. As this government is planning to do now, is that when you have the coastal rail, you link them to, let's Calabar, Port Harcourt, Warri. It's already in Warri. Let's hope what we have planned works. Itakpe, Lokoja, Obajena, Abuja.
So when
you link Port Harcourt to Warri, Itakpe to Abuja, you have taken goods and human beings from Warri, and the next plan is to Abuja, Nasarawa. Those plans are still there. Are you getting me?
So what you're saying, it is cost effective for your partners to inject funds into existing what you have on ground?
No, we don't have the standard gauge on ground.
No, but you already have, a railway network system, a railway system.
Yeah, the narrow gauge. The
narrow gauge.
Yes.
I don't know, Mr. Cattleson.
Yeah.
No, we'll be working on trying to concession it. Do you understand? I'm sorry to say we are on air. I'm one of those who believe that a businessman will not bring his money and say, I'm doing 100 kilometers of rail. For you to do a kilometer of rail, you just might imagine, let's say, assuming it's $3 million. Then you want to do 1,000 kilometers, multiply. So if you are a business person and you think you will recover the money in 50 years, is that a business person?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So I'm not a business.
Yes. If you actually permit me, I'd like to respond to quite a few things that my ND has mentioned. The first was the Central Rail concession, which we did in 2006. The idea was that it was meant to be a focal point of the iron and ore steel industry. For what I recall, it was meant to link Delta Steel with the Ajaokuta Steel with the Itakpe mines. And the main reason why it failed wasn't really because of the derailment, it was really because of the poorly structured concession of the mining industry in the first place. Because the railway was the heart of that mining industry, and we worked on that concession together. And the whole idea was that for that railway concession to succeed, the importation of coking coal to actually power Ajaokuta Steel, the iron ore and the limestone from Itakpe mines all going to Ajaokuta Steel, and the completed steel going to Delta Steel was all meant to go on that conveyor belt of a railway. So the reason why that failed wasn't really because of the structure, but actually because of the structure of the supporting industry. Now, I move on to the narrow gauge now. Yeah, one of the longest trains in the world that moves the longest freight is called the Sissin-Saudala line in South Africa, that links Saldanha all the way to the port very close to Cape Town. I worked on that concession during the aborted concession of Spornet in South Africa. Yeah, that's the longest train on a narrow gauge railway, moving miles of iron ore from Sishin, right? That record on narrow gauge, which is longer than any other standard gauge, has recently been broken by the Australian narrow gauge rail. So what the MD mentioned had nothing to do with the track, but had to do with the meandering nature of the Lagos to Kano line that was built 100 years ago by British technicians who wanted to build it as quickly as possible. So rather than make it straight, they actually went round obstacles as opposed to actually doing it in a straight line. So what we basically have to do is straighten it. Yeah. Now, in relation to the concession itself, the studies we did in 2010 showed, as the MD very rightly mentioned, we have a negative concession. A negative concession is really a concession where the private sector comes in. His job is to buy the locomotives, run the systems, and take control of the operation and maintenance of the track. But what we noticed was that there's almost a 20-year backlog maintenance on the narrow gauge. You can't pass that on to the private sector. So we have a negative concession. And most African rail concessions have failed because government always think the private sector is the ultimate solution. So what we actually designed was for government to put in funding of $600 million over a 5-6 year period, and that would have fixed the whole narrow gauge network and made it profitable for a private sector operator to run. So when we're talking railways in Nigeria today, it's not how many new lines we're building, but how many tons of freight are you moving? Just like we measure the megawatts of power. So you don't say we're building a new standard gauge. No. How much freight are you moving? We're moving less than 1% of the capacity of the narrow gauge today. So based on the rail concession, we could move from, I don't know how much the NRC is moving today, but I'll be surprised if it's anything more than 200,000 metric tons. We should be thinking of moving 200,000 metric tons to 10 million metric tons over a 5 or 6 year period. That will generate enough funds for the private sector operating that rail to continue to maintain that track, based on the kickoff funding they receive from government. Now we're spending $1.5 billion of money we don't have building a standard gauge line next to an existing line. So for me, I think that's where the problem is, as I continue to state. Bear with me, just one final point. The ports, right? The ports are the lifeline of any country, yeah? Right now, our neighboring countries in the Republic of Benin make an estimated 70 or 80% of their foreign exchange earnings from diverted cargo coming to Nigeria. So we as a country, we have ports in Lagos, we have ports in Warri, we have ports in Port Harcourt, we have ports in Onne. We designed in 2005 what we call interport competition, where ports start to compete very similar to the GSM operators. So that interport competition was meant to knock off the competition from the Republic of Benin, drop down the cost of the importation of goods, and have our ports connected to rail at Lagos, at Warri, at Port Harcourt, and using it to evacuate our freight. So that whole structure of port-rail interface under a transport master plan hasn't even been looked at. Hasn't even been looked for by this government. I conclude on the standard gauge expansion, right? We've talked about the need for the East-West line, which is the most profitable line in Nigeria based on the movement of freight. So if you build a line from, as I've explained, Abeokuta to Benin to Agbo to Onitsha to Asaba to Onitsha, you build that axis, that will generate enough funding in itself, and we extend the Abuja line all the way to Itakwe, so it links Abuja to Warri Port. So all of a sudden you have a central line going across and then an eastern line going across. And another gem in the narrow gauge is connecting Kano to Katsina to Jibia in Niger. So all of a sudden Nigerian ports are connected to the landlocked countries in Northern Africa. So somebody from Niger can put on his bill of lading not Lagos port but Jibia, and that container arrives at Lagos, gets put on a rail and taken directly to Jibia. Can you imagine how much revenue our railways will be able to generate? Yes, can I just finish? Just just one minor point. So this intermodal transport, the heart of it is based on what we call inland container depots. Why must a truck leave Kano to come all the way to Lagos to take one container? Where else does that happen in the world? So we planned a system where we'll build 6 inland container depots at strategic points all over the country. So a man from Kano or a man from Maiduguri can write on his bill of lading.
I think you do have
not Lagos ports, not Lagos, but Maiduguri ICD, Lagos ICD. So the minute the containers arrived, it's cleared in Maiduguri, it's cleared in Kano. So why we have this incredible congestion of people in massive influx of people, which I call to very similar to an invasion of people, into one port, ignoring the other ports in Nigeria, I find it completely baffling. And to compound that, we're building a standard gauge line down that congested axis. Where is the strategic planning here? It doesn't exist.
All right, I know I have to allow the MD to go, but let's just take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this conversation.
Advertising your goods and services on the right channel gives you an edge over your competitors. NTA News 24 has all the platforms for your target audience. The station is on DSTV channel 419, GoTV channel 46, StarTimes channel 101, and Free TV channel 703. With our digital format and wide range, we can reach your customers in next to no time. We are eager to promote your business, goods, and services. So partner with us for a very rewarding business experience. For more information, please call Henry on 0803-379-0884 or visit our office at NTA Headquarters, Area 11, Garki, Abuja. NTA News 24. News and more news.
All right, welcome back. You're watching Late Edition. This week we're looking at, of course, the milestones and prospects of railway. MD, you were going to say, a few words.
I want to talk about the port.
Please go ahead.
We've been together on this, trying to make railway, make Nigerian transport system work. We agree with me that the concession of the port dealt with railway seriously, because even on the Apapa port, we hardly have space to load the wagons, because the marshalling yards were those things that were concessioned. All the rail yards were concessioned, a name of concessioning. Where was the foresight? Because you concession the rail and gave the line out for people to build structure on them. That's what is affecting us. That's why the serious lock. So that in the mass to making money, you don't sell your future. You have concession the port. Money has been made. Are we providing the service to attract the people? So if you put 3 rake or 4 trains in the port of 25 wagons or 40 tons, that's 100 trailer of the roads. And you can do that twice in a day. But we have only one line going to the port now. As the minister insisted, the standard gauge must link the terminal so that the ship can drop straight, so that it's reduce double handling. So can you imagine, to handle the wagons that we put to the port presently, the terminal operators talk about 65,000 rail service, making cheap money. The same thing they would do for road, but they don't charge for road. So you have discouraged somebody who wants to use rail to go on road, because by the time They say you are paying 5,000 for rail, servicing the rail. You have discouraged him for using the rail. The rail that will take the load at half cost the road. But so what do? You go to the road, and what you have? Congestion. Money is not everything. It's the peace of mind that makes, because eventually if you don't, if you pursue money in the interest of having a steady working system, you will see the money you make, you spend it twice. So we should look at it properly. We are not building a parallel line on the narrow gauge, but we must move, according to them, to the next level. We must go standard. We must not be left behind. You talk about iron ore being moved from South Africa, longest train. Why they can't do that now? Because the company have the to mine the ore, and they move their products. It cannot continue like that. That mining that they are moving at the time will stop. So you just have to look and broaden your knowledge and understanding of the rail system to diversify. You cannot be making it now, but time to come, that place you think there's nothing to go on it, something will go on it. Okay. Take Itakbe or Warri. Now that we are started operating, you see structure coming up. Take Idu, that we thought nobody will ride the train to Abuja. You see structure coming up. Even Idu, more factories. When we started, when people are going, they are scared that nobody on the road. But now you already have traffic, people going to the station.
Yes, and that will take me to, let's look at Mr. Khalidson. Let's look at what we have on ground and how we can, of course, leverage, it and bridge the gaps. You've talked about Idu. Do you think that the Abuja Kaduna train, service, train experience, is it a good grounds to tranche us on to the next level in real project delivery?
Yes. The late President Yar'Adua, who I thought would have emerged as a very good president of this country, if not for his unfortunate illness, had a vision. And, he actually looked at it from a very pragmatic point of view. If we haven't got the money, don't do it. So he set up what we call the Presidential Contracts Commission, where they went round to identify all of the failed projects. So basically he had a strategy whereby if we don't have the money, let's focus on ongoing projects and forget any new projects. So part of his strategy was to cancel the Lagos to Kano rail line, because he didn't see the economic benefit of it, and he noticed Nigeria would struggle to pay back any loans that we collect from that. And he said at least, and he also agreed that he duplicated a corridor. It may not run parallel, but it's duplicating a corridor, right? And he agreed that the only line we'll build out of that 5 segments will be the Abuja to Kaduna line, with the intention of, by the time it hits Abuja, we'll continue to hit all the way to Ajaokuta. Now that line now, it's great, but it's running at a loss. Passenger services, I don't know how much NRC are subsidizing that line for. So there's a tremendous loss without any real financial benefit to the country. Yes, it's a social service, but we're talking about what we call bang for buck.
Have you investigated that it doesn't have any financial gains to the country?
No, economic impact. It has to lead to a port. I've told you it's important.
But that's not just the...
It's important, baby. It's important for the profitability of any rail line is based on the amount of freight it carries. And that line can carry both passenger and freight. So we use a combination of passenger and freight to at least afford the possible subsidies that you pay for the passenger lines. So it's important for that line to be connected to the ports so that it can continue to make freight. And there's a good point about the port concessions. One of my first visits to the port concession was actually through MD. We went there together in 2005, 2006, and he raised the concerns about access to the ports. And one of the first studies we tried to do in the BPE was how do we guarantee rail access to the ports during the port concessions. So that common land, if I recall, doesn't belong to the concessionaire, but belongs to MPA. So MPA still has the power to go in there, take over the sites where the tracks have been built on and to rebuild the tracks.
Okay,
So
I just pause you, Mr. Yes, because I'd like him to
initiative.
take the last so that I can release him.
Okay, fair.
Yes.
You see, Kaduna Abuja has opened an eye that rail can walk. If that is the only thing it has brought to Nigerians, the attention we have in rail is not the same before Abuja Kaduna. So it's good that we started from there, and everybody now see that the rail can walk and it can make people live longer than they had the short life. Because if you go on rail, you have peace of mind, and at least you will live longer. Those are the things that brought that the people in power, not just for the ordinary person, can enjoy the benefit of having a good train ride. That is what it has brought. Going forward, that is why you see we are starting from the port now, from Lagos, heading north. We are starting from Port Harcourt, linking Itakpe-Warri, linking Kaduna Abuja, linking Nasarawa and going up. The plan is still there, but you have to start something that makes meaningful. He's talking about raising money through rail. So for you to make money through rail, if you're an investor, you have to get the stops side. But as a government, you don't put money, you should put the benefit to your citizens that can last. It's not just, you don't measure the impact most time. That's where I think most of African government miss it. They measure by the naira or by money. Because what you don't get by operating rail, you get the benefit of your roads lasting longer. The people that are losing their life as a result of accidents or as a result of I see only a mad person that say I want to hold train.
Finally, what is happening to Lagos? You started a free ride on the Agbado Abeokuta axis.
No, we started, and that was on the, they completed one of the double track, and the contractor said, "Do you want me to deliver a mail Ibadan? And I'm using this track to also move products. If you want to continue to run, you give me extension of time. I will have to balance it." I said, okay, continue to use the rail to move your construction material till maybe by the end of May we will come back.
All right, Engineer Freeborn Fidet Okedia, I'm sorry, we have to let him go because he has a flight to catch. Yes, take it. Okay, just a final word from you.
Yeah, I think, when we talk economic impact, it's not return to the government we're looking at, it's return to the economy. The impact on the economy. Can we grow? Right now, I feel that the economy is being stifled because of a lack of a clearly planned and structured railway network. So therefore, it's not return to government, it's economic impact we're looking at.
All right, let me again appreciate Engineer Freeborn Fidet Okedia, the MD of Nigeria Railway Corporation. Thank you very much for your time. And Khalidson, I'm trying hard. Khalidson, that's
yes.
it. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate both of you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All right, that's it this week on Late Edition. We've looked at, of course, the railway modernization project in Nigeria and, of course, how we can bridge the gap. I am Claire Delabu Abdulrazak. Bye-bye.